Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and we are pleased to let you know that we have issued our fourth position paper on a topic that we think, or all these topics we believe are important to Southbury's long-term benefit. We find a lot in the news is covering short-term issues that people are very excited about, but our campaign, we try to take a little more of a long-term vision to identify issues that we think really are going to affect, as I say, Southbury in the long term, and we hope will be to the benefit of Southbury if they are adopted. Tonight what we want to talk about is our youth, and we think that's pretty appropriate as school begins this week, albeit a little later than was intended due to Tropical Storm Irene, but our youth is very important to this community. It provides a level or a quality to the area that's, I think everybody recognizes as a fundamental part of it, both in the quality of our schools, which is so fundamental to the housing values that we have, as well as just the fact that we have a complete community that represents all ages. Since I've lived here in Southbury, I've become aware of some of the problems with youth. Just as anybody watching the news, we've seen some tragic situations, whether it's been related to drugs or other activities that sort of imply that a lot of our youth do not have as many positive outlets to instill good behavior. And I've heard parents talking about this on and on. But as I got more involved in the campaign, I started to learn a lot more and a lot more specifics. And a lot of this concerned me because what I kept finding is different organizations in town identifying the same problem and trying to work it on their own, rather than coming together as one community and saying we've got to work together. With, in my mind, there needing to be more leadership from the First Selectman. Initially, I think what I found, just look at my notes for a second, was when I first started going to the Southbury Economic Development Commission meetings back in 2005 and 2006, as the town's representative to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I heard several presentations by the Waterbury Y about why Southbury's demographics would be excellent for a Y facility. This was obviously not the first time it had come up years before that, but it was an interesting idea, but without a champion for it, it seemed to just kind of fade away. But it kind of left a mark in my mind that said there really is a need for something here. There were several tragic events in the spring of 2010, and we saw a lot of effort by our Board of Selectmen, as well as other organizations, some that Suzanne started up, to try and find out more detail from the students themselves, what they thought was missing in Southbury. And that led to the development of a survey that was implemented in the high school. Went to all the high school students. Results were tabulated, presented back to the Board of Selectmen, I believe in the fall, September, October of 2010. Another committee was created to review those results. They presented their results in January, and from the best that I've been able to discern from the Selectmen, there those results sit, or there that study sits. Similarly, in 2011, Region 15 contracted with the Search Institute to do another survey. This on teen resiliency, looking at various factors that can, or looking at various aspects of teens' personal behavior, their home situation and the community environment to help understand where that we might be vulnerable with our teen populations. So that was a separate survey, and we hope to see the results of that in the fall of 2010. And more recently, actually only weeks ago, I found out that the Papa Rock Health District has started another project to look at the health of our community, or let's say the health of our citizens, and recognizing that the community facilities have a lot to do with future health and well-being of citizens. This is funded by the Center for Disease Control down in Atlanta, CDC, because they've realized that long-term, we really aren't going to get a handle on healthcare costs unless we start to look at the fundamental problems that cause health problems, long-term chronic health problems. And one of the things they've started to do as part of this program, which is called Achieve, is did a survey. Some of you might have seen them out there at the Kmart doing their survey. And ironically, one of the things that people kept identifying was well, we need something like a YMCA here in Southbury. So again, we seem to see very similar themes keep coming up, but yet not much in the way of progress. The other thing is when I started my campaign, I went out and spoke to many of the religious leaders in town. And almost all of them indicated that they are concerned that the community does not have enough positive experiences, venues, activities for teens. They're all trying to work on this, and some of them have made good progress, but they're all still frustrated. So my point of all of this is that what we see is a lot of organizations in Southbury aware and concerned about the same problems, but not doing very much, or not doing very much to work together. Ironically, as I was putting the final pieces on the position paper, we got an email back from the director of the Y in Waterbury, Jim O'Rourke, and said, oh, by the way, we just got a grant from the Southbury Community Trust Fund to develop 2 new programs for Southbury teens. I've asked the selectmen, were they aware of this, especially the selectmen who've been involved in the teen survey, and they said news to me. I'm not trying to critique everybody, but I'm just saying there's a lack of fundamental coordination and collaboration that I think would lead to a much better outcome. So what are we committed to doing? Well, at this point, I hope you've understood that it's an area that we take very seriously, that if elected, one of the first things I will do is follow the recommendation of the director of the Y to establish an exploratory committee. One of the reasons I've asked Suzanne to be here is she has been very helpful for me in my relations with Jim O'Rourke at the Y, and I think she would be willing to be on that exploratory committee. But I think what Suzanne and I have also talked about is that for it to be successful, you need the leadership of the First Selectman to be intimately involved in that. Whether that means he heads that committee or is a participant in that committee, that we can work out. But his presence needs to be there to say, we are serious about this, we want to explore the feasibility of it. The exploratory committee would actually look into very specifically what should be in that Y. If you go to YMCAs around the country, they're not cookie cutters, they're not all the same. In the same token, the Y has lots of excellent online tools to help you design, have a committee design what that community needs. So you don't, as I said, just take something off the shelf. You design what facility Southbury needs. So it might be that we have plenty of health facilities that have cardiovascular equipment, so we don't need that. But what we do need is maybe more community rooms where youth can engage in activities or participate theatrical events and do things of that nature. So we're committed to doing that. And the other is that we're committed to is that the teen survey that was done at the high school, the recommendations from that survey said that there should be established a youth advisory committee to Parks and Recreation to make sure that there's some communication between what the staff at Park and Recreation is putting together and what the youth think they need. And we will work towards establishing that committee with youth involved. So those are the 2 initiatives we're committed to, as well as bringing together all of the parts of our community that are concerned about the activities and venues available for our youth. And with that, I will turn it over to Ron, see if he has anything he'd like to add.
The only thing I'd like to add is that Ed has mentioned the survey several times. He mentioned it. And I think it's really irresponsible to do a survey and then take the survey results and just put them in the drawer somewhere and really not do anything about it. I think Ed's comments about the 2 initiatives that he just spoke of, I'm fully in support of that, both of those. But I think it shows action. It shows that we've asked people their opinions, and then instead of ignoring what has come out of those results, just totally ignoring them, there's some action that has been laid out here. So I think, I fully support what Ed has said, but I think it's very important to note that you can't go and ask people their opinion, get that opinion, and then just totally ignore it. And so I think these initiatives that Ed has talked about this evening are very important.
You want to add anything to that?
To be honest, I've been out of town for the last week and have read the position paper, but haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. I was out in Texas welcoming our new granddaughter. But that got me thinking, I didn't have time to look or plan or come up with remarks, but what we're doing as volunteers is really about the future of our community. I think that's the reason that all of us volunteer, is not just to make it better tomorrow, but to make it better for our children and our children's children. And I think that this initiative is something that's essential to make our community better.
So with that, if there are questions from anyone here?
I'm sorry, the grant that the Y received is from the Southbury?
Community Trust Fund.
Okay.
That's what they told me.
We'll get that email in a couple of weeks. Doesn't usually come in October. We'll get that.
Maybe I shouldn't have said anything about it, but Jim did share that with me.
No, it's I think every October they have a news conference, but I'm sure it's not there. I read the position paper too, and you mentioned something in it about a community center.
Well, the Y could become that community center, or
Okay.
we might decide we need something different than a Y. That the exploratory committee should be open-minded to that.
Sure.
But we're also thinking about, or had conversations with the Newberry Musical Theater,
Yeah.
which has done some very good productions here the last couple of years at the high school. But would like to make, and it's really once a year in the summer. They very much would like to see something year-round to provide amateur theater that would attract people of all ages, not just youth-oriented, but seniors as well. In fact, I think I know their productions have been for all ages. And I think this year got very favorable reviews from Heritage Village as far as the involvement. So they would love a venue like that. I've been in touch with them with a couple of ideas. They've had prior conversations about that. Too early to say anything specific, but that might be something that could fit in a Y, or it might be separate from a Y. And I think that's really important too, that we not get into this idea that there's one silver bullet that's going to solve this problem. And as soon as you build that one thing, every teen, every youth person in town is going to go to that one, because there's just so much variety. I've said this to so many people as I go around and I do this door-to-door knocking all over Southbury. I'm learning every day about the diversity that is in this community. And I'm not sure I really understood that until as you go to different neighborhoods and you see the variety of people here, and with that, the variety of needs that they have. So we can't assume every family looks the same, has the same goals and objectives and needs. And that's why we've got to start with something. But I don't think one facility is going to do everything.
Right. I had a thought. I've worked at the paper since '97, and back in '97 I wrote a story, and I actually dug it up, about a committee that was founded here in Southbury. It was the community to study the community center. They got going, they did some really good work, and then it just died because there was probably like you said, lack of support, lack of money, lack of leadership. One of the big stumbling blocks that they always were citing was money. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, I'm sure the Y would be maybe a public-private partnership type of thing. Maybe they fund the whole thing, I don't know. But
Well, I think our conversations, they're not a big bank. So
right.
at the end of the day, it's got to come from the community.
Right.
But that doesn't mean taxes. I think there are people here we've seen with lots of other activities in town who are willing to invest. And I don't want to speak for anybody, I don't want to commit them, but we have foundations that are in the area who look for things that are positive. So I think that's true. I think that's a potential. And we are lucky. We have some very generous people in this community that have given generously to other activities in town. But that's clearly one of the exploratory committee tasks. And one of the things I think I liked when we talked, Suzanne and Jim and I talked, is maybe you start out with a storefront. I mean, look in this room here. So some people might imagine the Waterbury Y, and they see, well, it's going to have a swimming pool, it's going to have a basketball court, it's going to have all of these great things. Maybe it doesn't start out that way. Maybe it starts out much smaller, with a very specific identified need, and that grows from there. On the other side, correct me if I'm wrong, Suzanne, but I think that Jim referred to a couple of other communities that have built these, and they are self-sustaining. I mean, they pay for themselves. They go out and borrow money. They've got a game plan or a business plan, and they identify enough activities that generate revenue and can sustain themselves, because then they attract from the other communities. And we know our location offers some of that. There are many people who would much rather come, it's much easier for them to come to Southbury than go to Waterbury or Danbury. They might be going to those two places today, but, and that's why I think Jim and the Y sees us as being an ideal location. Not only the demographics of Southbury, our own community, but where we're located, 84, as well as being a gateway to towns to the north and west of here. So all those things are things that we have in our favor.
Quite often the money will follow the need, and the need seems to be here for something such as this. I think it came out pretty clearly in the surveys. But again, I think Ed has shown leadership where he has said, let's study that. And if in fact we feel the need is there, I think the money will find its way.
And I would hate to see us focus too much on the why as the answer, because it may not be the answer. I think that the whole idea here and what the position paper makes clear is that we should be exploring possibilities. You know, it could be something else other than a YMCA, but you know, just to have somebody looking at what the possibilities might be would be a positive step forward.
I mean, it is, you know, we're in a very strange situation, and we're critiquing study after study after study, and then you can say, but all they want to do is one more study. And that's, you know, we realize we're in that bind because right now we have no authority to do anything until elected. So that's why we spent a lot of time in the position paper to talk about this history that just seems to talk about an uncoordinated approach. Everybody's sort of going off on their own.
Is the paper online?
Yeah. Yep. We put that out Monday or so.
I saw it today, it's in there.
Right. So it should be out there on the website. Yeah, so take a look at that, and again, I hope it's clear, we're not critiquing people who've done these things. All of these are good initiatives with good intentions, but I think what we're finding is lacking in Southbury is a leadership to bring them together, so that it's not everybody sort of in their own boat, rowing their oars in their own direction, rather than trying to bring them together.
And in fact, I think that some of the people who have worked on these other studies or initiatives, we would love to have them jump in and participate, because you know, there's knowledge there that you would hate to lose. It's not like we want to start again from scratch. We want to use what they've accumulated.
Well, that's a really good point, because maybe I didn't stress that with the exploratory committee. We want to make sure it is populated, not just with, let's say, Parks and Rec people or the Parks and Rec Commission, but it should include Region 15. It should include representatives from the religious community. It should include people from the Pomperaug Health District, and on from there. So want to be collaborative, bring in all the organizations, much like we talked about with our strategic planning exercise. It shouldn't be just Town Hall doing it by itself, but bringing in all of the major stakeholders who have a role to play in the future of Southbury.
It's kind of like the LPC, the Local Prevention Council. Take a little bit of, they have people from, you know what that is?
Well, I know through the YFS.
Yes, exactly. They have from different segments of the community coming together.
Well, again, as we're speaking, and again, I think everyone knows we're moving as quickly as we can with the campaign, but we probably should have given a little more credit to SMART and that initiative to try to pull together people and think about our youth and all of that activity of it, educating the population about the improper use of drugs, illicit drugs here in our community, because it's a serious problem. It's no longer, well, as you pointed out so well in those presentations, it's the pharmaceutical misuse of pharmaceutical drugs has really become a problem. So that's part of this puzzle, and how do we try to stop that from happening? And again, as we've seen in other things, these are nationwide problems. So we've got to be careful to not overstate what we can do here in Southbury, but we're committed to saying we got to start somewhere. Southbury is as good a place to start as any. That's what we want to do. Okay?
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And now we'll put the air conditioner back on.
Maybe we need it.
It's just